Well, hello guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the build of the FB Jets F-15 massive aircraft. Thanks for tuning into the videos. Let's roll that intro and get back into this build. Alright guys, in the last video we did the hot section of the plane and we also started or basically got the elevator set up all sorted. So we're good to go with that stuff, but we do have that big problem that we ran into. The blocks that hold the elevator bearings are loose. So we need to get that stuff sorted out before we continue finishing up the elevators. So if you haven't seen that video, make sure you check it out. There's a link down below to the build series, but basically what we need to do is we need to figure out how to tighten up those bearing blocks when we only have access to like 1 out of 4, maybe 2 out of 4 of the bolts and nuts that are holding it all together. So this is the side that we got all mocked up last time, and as we talked about, basically we are loose in between here and the mounting surface, and then our actual bearing block that's glued in here is loose because the whole thing's loose. So what we're going to do is we are going to grind out all of this existing epoxy, that's right there, and hopefully get access to this bolt as well. When we get access to this bolt, we'll tighten it down as much as possible. That means that these two top ones are tight, and then we're going to re-epoxy this entire area. Now, when this was originally done, there was no scratching of the aluminum to promote adhesion of the epoxy to the metal, and when we grind this all out, of course, we're going to get some grinding of the surface of the metal, which is going to help the epoxy to cure. Now we do have another option, as I talked about, which is not a good one, is we could cut some access holes or something in the top side of that pointy thing that sticks out, but not really my preferred way of doing it if we can make it work from the top side. So this is the way we're going to tackle it for now, and hopefully we don't need to do anything more crazy than that. Okay guys, so I was able to use one of my really short Allen keys with a ball end, use my magnet and get it in there. Now this one I wasn't able to get anything into, so I think the head is filled with epoxy. The other one I was able to, or maybe it was vice versa. Anyways, the one I was able to get it into, I couldn't tighten it anymore. So I was able to reach my finger in there, turn the Allen key, nothing would happen. So what we're going to do first is we're going to put some CA in between the bearing block and the former here. So all I'm going to do is give it a little bit of forward pressure on the surface, put some thin CA in here in the joints, and we're going to spray a little bit of kicker in there, and that's going to help to hold it in the correct spot. Once that's done, then we can Dremel out our epoxy there and work on that. Okay, so all I'm going to do, again, a little bit of forward pressure, put some thin CA on there. And that wood really soaked it up. And then we're going to spray a little bit of kicker. Now I suspect that is enough. Yeah, there you go. So now there's zero play, but of course you don't want to rely on the CA to hold that against the former here. So that's why we need to do the Dremel work and get rid of that epoxy and create a reinforcement. But yeah, that made a huge difference on how strong it is. So zero play now. All right guys, ground out all the epoxy on this one side. You can see all the grind marks there, and was able to expose the bolt head and pry out the epoxy that was in the bolt head. So I got 1 1/4 turns to 1.5 turns out of that bolt. So now with both of those tight, with the CA filling the gaps and all that stuff, the surface when you put it on is nice and solid. So this epoxy that we're going to put around this area is just going to be a nice little added bonus, and it's going to help stiffen everything up. But ultimately, it was, I'd rather not have to do this stuff, but of course we noticed it, we addressed it, and it's dealt with and problem solved. Now we do have to repeat the same thing on the other side, so I'm going to get that ground out, tighten those bolts up, and then we're ready to epoxy that in place. All right, guys, next day, and our high sol on both sides is all cured. I just put this elevator back in, and we are solid. Zero play now, side to side, and I feel a lot more confident with this whole setup now. So, muy bueno, very, very good. And now what we're going to do is we are going to go back to the servos. So this one is ready to install. Before I install that one, I'm going to make a matching one for this side, do the same things on this side, and then we're going to have to run our lines, and then we can install the elevator servos. All right, guys, the first big problem with the F-15 from FB Jets. Now, I don't really consider these blocks being loose a problem, and part of the reason for that is our climate here is really, really dry in Calgary. So generally what happens is wood shrinks and that will come loose. So that's almost to be expected when we get a covered airplane. Usually out of the box, the covering is insanely loose because the wood shrunk. So, but this is purely just a poor manufacturing thing here. So it's going to be hard to show this on camera, but basically if we look at the right one, this may be the best way to show you. So this is when the plane's upside down, we'll just refer to this as the right one. But when we're looking at this one, this wood is basically, we'll call it straight up and down at that position. And then when we go to the other one, the wood is angled this way. I could measure it, but by my eye, I'm saying it's probably about 10 degrees. So the problem with that is this one is the first elevator servo that we did, really, really close to center. And because of the angle of this plate is almost level. It's up just a little bit. Now we come to this side, and the problem is that piece of wood, which is the entire structure here, is rotated like this. So back like that. So what that does is that raises the servo up, and now the servo can't actually go through its proper motion. It's completely screwed up. Now there's actually, I'll take the measurement here. So one of the things is the measurement of the hole is the same per side. So we're looking at about 39 millimeters from the bottom of the hole here to the top of the plane. So that's fine. I've already checked that. That's the same for both sides. So this is essentially the pivot point. Then they glue this piece in, this whole structure, and the other side is shifted up like that. But if we measure the bottom of that plate to the top of the airframe, we're at 42 millimeters, 43 millimeters on this side, which is the right side, or the correct side. And on this side, we're a little bit shorter. So a couple millimeters, enough that it's throwing this whole thing off. So here's a little different perspective for you guys. So this is our first servo, and it's in the center, and we are 36 millimeters from the bottom of the output shaft to the top of the fuselage. And on this side, we are 31. So about 5 millimeters difference in height. So this servo is essentially sitting 5 millimeters higher than the other servo. So you can see here with the servo in the center position, definitely different. It should be sitting down here around that midpoint, which sucks big time. All right, guys, well, after looking at this, there's really no way that we can make this setup work, so we're going to have to grind out that entire plate or almost all of it to make it work. To give you another perspective here, this should be sitting completely flush with our straight edge there, our protractor, and we've got that angle, right? So everything's completely skewed. And the other thing too is on the other side, this flat part of this plate is actually sitting flat with the skin or the opening for the cover. As you can see right there, it's nice and flat. It's parallel to the opening for the cover. And on this side, we're skewed. So the bearing block doesn't really matter because it's rotating around this position. What matters though is that plate location. So what we're going to have to do is I've marked out the area where my servo was sitting. So if we grind out this entire area with the Dremel, and we're going to have to build spacers down because the thickness of the plate isn't enough, I don't think, to do this. So we're going to have to build a spacer setup and then put another plate from the bottom to mount the servo to. So it's going to be a crap load of work. Quite disappointing to see this in a kit because this is such a critical area. But when it's all said and done, we'll make it work and it will be just as strong, if not stronger than before. But we do have a bunch of grinding to do. All right, guys, well, there it is, all cut out. And I guess one of the positives is we now have access to one of those bolts to tighten them up, even though that problem is all fixed. So I just did some rough measurements. I marked out on the side of the fuselage there the position that I want that output shaft to be in. And that position is based on this side, which we're happy with. And my rough measurements say that if we glue a plate on the bottom of that existing one, it should work out perfect. So, fortunately, the kit includes these plates, which we're not going to use. These go in the nose, and we're not using these because they're carbon, laminated onto plywood. So, great for doing stuff like this, and they are extremely stiff. So that's actually going to work awesome because we can cut this up and use this to make a new servo mount. When you're gluing this, you just have to make sure you sand this really well because you want something for it to adhere to. So we're going to go really excessive with the epoxy, and but first thing we need to do is cut out a plate that's going to fit in there and have some overlap on the bottom. All right, guys, so spent some time making the plate here. The screw is just so I can get it in and play around with it, and that's going to be our fixing point as well. So essentially what we're doing is we're just mixing up a bunch of epoxy, and we are just going to epoxy the poop out of this thing. And it's going to sit something like that. So it's going to replace everything that was in there. And we still have the channel on that side for the servo arm to fit into. And hopefully that works out well, gives us enough depth, and we can get back to building this plane. So now I know some of you have asked in various videos and different builds that I've done, you know, how do you work up the nerve to cut into a brand new airplane like this? Really what it comes down to, guys, is you just got to do what you got to do to make the thing flyable. I mean, when you think about it, FB jets or global jets, global jets specifically, they didn't have anything to do with the manufacturing of this airplane. It was FB jets, right? So are they going to send us a new airframe? Probably not for a problem like this. So what do? We just make it work. We remanufacture it, we re-engineer it, and solve the problem. At least that's the way I work. I don't know how you guys do things, but that's the way I figure things out. And this should work just perfect, and we should be stronger than original, which is usually the way things work out when you over-engineer them or re-engineer them because you have the opportunity to make it better. So I'm going to glue this up. It's going to need to sit overnight. I hope, fingers crossed, that my measurements all work out good and we can continue on with this. It looks like we need 3 millimeters roughly, which is the thickness of that plate. So we're dropping the servo 3 millimeters, and hopefully this works out. So, you know, ultimately, what did it cost for me? It cost a couple hours of time to get this all figured out. It cost, you know, about a quarter of a tube or about a third of a tube of high salt to put this together, and a little bit of that carbon plate, and just mainly just time. So. But that's it. So if you guys have any questions about this specifically, feel free to comment down below. Email me, thelightersideofrc@gmail.com. But life goes on. All right, guys. So we've got everything sitting there curing, and we will come back to this tomorrow. So that screw in there, you can see I've got the clamp holding the screw, and I've pushed the clamp in all the way, so the actual body of the clamp is sitting against the fuselage. And that's preventing it from falling down. And then I've got this Allen key here as well too, which is cantilevering it up, so it's not going to go anywhere. So we're positioned nicely, and we just need to let that cure, and then we can worry about it tomorrow. Now there's a bunch of extra material that I've tried to scrape off there, and there's a little bit of excess on the sides. We're going to keep all that if we can, but if not, we just take the Dremel and just clean up the sides and make the servo fit, because we minimize the amount of cutout there to try and keep as much of the original material. But so that's done, and we will revisit that tomorrow and see how it all fits. Boom, just like that, guys. 24 hours later. Okay, so everything is nice and cured with our mount. If I smack it like that, it proves to you that it is not going anywhere. So we take our servo. Servo is roughly centered. Drop it in there, and it fits really close. We may have to do a little bit of Dremel work, but that is really close. And if you look from the side, so we do have a gap underneath the servo that I can see. So what I need to do is Dremel out the extra high sol a little bit, but it looks like that's going to drop right into the right place. So I'm going to Dremel that out a little bit, make some space for the servo. We'll get the servo installed, like laying there, plugged in, and we'll see how that all worked out. All right, guys, servo is all installed, and everything lines up beautifully with the other servo. So it added a day's worth of work, 24 hours. Not 24 hours worth of work, but it added another day just messing around with this thing. But we are solved on the elevators. So next thing we're going to do is we are going to run the wires to the front. That's going to finish running or routing the elevators. And then we are going to do the cover setup for the elevators. So routing the wires is pretty straightforward. I'm not going to show you guys that stuff. We're just running the wire. We're lining it with snake skin. Pretty straightforward. Might be a bit of a pain because the pipes are installed, but anyways, so we're going to route the wires next, and then I'll show you guys what we're doing with the covers of the elevator servos. All right, guys, box showed up today from Swiwin. Let's open this thing up. I know what's inside, but you guys don't know what's inside. All right, so we've got some bubble wrap, and we've got a package of 10 smoke pumps. So we have smoke pumps back in stock at the website. Link down below, thelightersideofrc.com. These are amazing smoke pumps, great value, pump a ton of fluid, completely variable, run off a 3-cell LiPo. Check them out. All right, guys, so we're just working away on the wiring here from the back. We've almost got that done, so it's time to treat the woodwork on the inside. So we've got those engine mounts or the pipe mounts that we need to treat. We've got the pipe mounts that we need to treat for the bell mouth, and we've got the side of the engine rails, which we need to treat as well too. So we're going to get that done. And we've also got the blocks in the back end, which aren't super important, but we'll do them anyways. So that's what we're doing next, just mixing up some 15-minute epoxy, and we'll thin that out with some rubbing alcohol and paint it on. All right, guys, so everything is done in the back end. So we've got both of our wires run for the rudders over there. We've got the woodwork sealed. We've got some additional foil installed back there to protect the wires. We've got all of our wires run down the side of the fuselage, and there's a hole drilled in the former, and that's zip tied together. So now those wires are going to be out of the way of the pipe and engine. And the other thing we did was the rear wing fixing mechanism here for the spar is fastened with 6 Allen key bolts and nuts. So we have access to 3 of them. So we just tightened up 3 of them. The backside on the nuts, they're held in with epoxy, so they were fairly easy to tighten. The top ones here we don't have access to. The bottom ones we do have access to, and they were, again, a little bit loose just because shrinkage on the wood. So with everything being done now, we are ready to reinstall the pipes. All right, guys, so with the pipes back installed, we flipped the airframe over to address some of the gear doors. Now, some of the gear doors had some open ends and stuff just where the doors have been impacted, and this one screw had been pulled in, so the door was a little bit soft. So we're just addressing the main gear doors and doing some gluing there. Next thing we can do is fit the cover plates. Now, the one thing with the cover plates is you've got to clean up the glue line all the way around. Otherwise, you're going to have some interference there. So what I like to do for that is just use my small little plane and just go in and clean some of that stuff up. And all you're doing is getting rid of the little ridges that are going to interfere with that sitting flat. So, and I think the plan here is we're going to leave 2 access holes in the cover plate, so you don't have to take this cover plate off to remove the elevators, and that will work beautifully, I think. Ladies and gentlemen, mostly gentlemen because there's no ladies that listen to the channel, welcome back to another edition of Tip Time. All right, so we need to make appropriate holes in the cover plates that match up with the bolts underneath. So the best way to do that, easiest way to do that, is lay masking tape over top. You're going to punch holes to line up with those screws perfectly. And once you're happy with that, and if you're not happy with your first result, you just peel the masking tape off and do it all over again. Then what you're going to do is pull the tape back, put your cover plate on, reinstall the masking tape, and now you've got your drill marks where they line up perfectly. All right, guys, the glue that we put on all the doors worked out just perfect, so now they're a lot more stiff. We will be putting some lube on those things here shortly. I'll show you that in a little bit. We got another exciting thing show up today. We got our order from Sticker App. So we got lighter side of RC stickers. And clear ones. They don't look good like that, but they look good when they're on. There's the clear one. That's the small one, and that's the large one. So these ones both have solid backs. So I think with any order on the website, I think I'll be throwing in a couple stickers in the box. So if you have anything you need to order, go on the website and check it out. I'll throw them in the order boxes from now on. Okay, so that cover side all worked out. We're just going to put our screws and drill our holes for this other side exactly the same way we did that side. All right, guys, and the final thing I think we're going to talk about in this video, and I'll show you how I do this, is dealing with the gear doors. So these doors aren't bad. There's definitely a fair bit of resistance there. So what the whole goal here is to see if we can loosen these up a little bit. So what I like to do is I'll take some silicone shock oil. Really doesn't matter what weight you use. And we're going to do a couple things here. Number one, we're just going to put a drop on the actual shaft. And you just work that in and out and see what that does. Now there's no metal to metal grinding. So if you're operating these doors and you feel like the cylinder is like grinding, that means the O-ring's not either not seated properly, not working properly. There's tons of side pressure on it. So that didn't really make a big difference, but at least our shaft is lubed. Get your mind out of the gutter. Next thing we want to do is we want to get some oil inside the actual cylinder. If we had good access to these cylinders, we could just hold the shock oil up to it while we're operating the cylinder, and that might work. Now we probably can do that on the lower nipple here, and I will try and capture this on video. And the top one, we just use a small piece of airline. So I'll get that ready and I'll show you guys how I do that. Okay, so you are resting on the fuselage. So if you're shaky a little bit, that's why. Okay, when I do this, I like to use a piece of Robart airline. The Robart airline is nice and soft and supple, and it usually comes on and off the nipples quite easily. So just to show you this as best as possible, we'll put the tubing on the lower nipple. Now you don't need to get it on there all the way, you're just resting it on there. And then what we do, we just look at the way this is working. So when I'm opening the door, the O-ring's moving this way, which is going to suck fluid into the cylinder. So all I will do is drip some lubricant over top of the airline while I'm opening the door, and that sucks the lube into the cylinder. Now you don't need to get tons in there. A couple drops is plenty. That side's done. Now what we do is just pop that tube off, and we'll just put it on the other side. And usually at this point, as you're moving the gear door, if you have too much in there, or even if you don't have too much in there, when you actually cycle this cylinder, you might have a little bit of silicone oil coming out. Not a big deal. So on this one is the opposite. So as we close the door, it's going to suck the oil into the cylinder. And there we go. One is done. Now what I'll do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to do all the cylinders on the main doors, and they all get treated the same way. Now you got to remember, when this airplane is cycling its gear, what actually happens here is main gear doors open, back gear door opens, gear comes down, and doors close. Just the main ones, or the front ones. This one stays open. When the gear's cycling back up, these gear doors open, gear comes up, then they all close. So just keep that in mind when we're programming the Xicoy Failsafe / sequencer. That's an important thing to remember. We'll revisit this, of course, when we get to that point, but that's how you think about this when you are programming that controller. So that is basically everything for this video, guys. I'm going to go through and do all these gear doors, but that's the end of this video. So what happened in this video? Well, we got the major reconstruction of that elevator completed. It was a lot of grinding, a lot of gluing, a lot of waiting. We got our elevators reinstalled. We got the pipes back in. We got the former work treated with epoxy, and we got all of our lines run from the back to the front. So kind of boring stuff for this episode, but we did cover a lot. Now I think in the next episode we're going to start to see some really cool things happen. In my mind, this is what we're doing in the next episode. So we will start to run airlines from the main to the front. So we're going to start to get the airlines sorted out. We're probably going to get the engines installed. We're going to get some of the electronic plates installed, and we may be close enough in the next video to bolt the front section or nose section onto the aircraft. So there's going to be a lot of big steps accomplished in the next video. Don't miss out on that video, guys. If you're not a subscriber, hit that subscribe button down below. When you do hit that subscribe button, don't forget to hit the bell so you get notified when I release new videos. Don't forget to give the video a thumbs up, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we will see you in the next episode.